I want to welcome everyone to this meeting featuring Wind Harvest, and we're super excited about it today with the CEO and co-founder Kevin Wolf. We will have a Q&A section afterwards. It will be after the presentation, so feel free to ask your questions in the chat during the presentation for Q&A following, or if you would like, you can unmute and ask yourself after the presentation as well. The company Wind Harvest is the company's wind harvesters will be the first industrial scale vertical axis wind turbines to be the third-party certified and begin sales. To tell you more about it, I would like to introduce you to Wind Harvest CEO and co-founder Kevin Wolf. He is a major investor in the company and is also an expert on all aspects of turbine and the industry. So with that, Kevin, I will turn the time over to you.
Well, thank you. I am happy to be here. Yeah, I have a long history with this company. I met the founder way back in the 1980s and was very excited about the idea that wind would be a renewable energy source. And in 1990, this is the original company, the Wind Harvest Company. I invested money in it, saw their product go up in Wales on Prince Charles's property. And then Enron became a partner, and then that whole project fell apart, and Enron seemingly just took the power purchase agreement and left them stranded. And I came in and helped them at the end of that period of time and exchanged my consulting company's time for shares in the company. And we got through this new breakthrough of the coupled vortex effect, which I'll tell you about. And we ended up starting a new company, Wind Harvest International, and all of us old shareholders formed that new company in 2006 and sold all of our IP, et cetera, to the new company. So that's how I ended up being a co-founder of Wind Harvest International. I started off as its CEO, and I brought in a $5 million round, but my board did not like it, and I was removed as the CEO and became the chief operating officer for the company. And I continued in every aspect of the company, from writing its grants to working with the engineers to developing projects. The co-founders died in 2015, including our Series A lead investor, and his heirs did not want to keep funding the company, and we had a very rough time. After 2015, put a lot of my own personal money into the company again and brought in friends and family and kept the company going, and we were able to come up with a solution of the problems that we had in the technology, but we couldn't get anybody to finance us. So I became the CEO again in 2019, and we developed a crowdfunding raise where we raised $2.5 million and got the technology through the technology readiness level 7, which is a full-scale prototype, and I'll tell you more about that. So I've been the CEO again since 2019, and I am determined to bring this product to market. It's my way and to have this company gain liquidity, because that is the way my family and I are going to make money out of this company, is to see it become a liquidity event for all of us shareholders in it. And I'm happy to answer any of those questions. What I think I'll do right now is I'll just jump right in and share my screen and give you my deck so that you can see what we hang on a second. I just got to get this view over here, and there we go. So basically, the issue here is turbulent wind and the many decades-long effort by many companies to be able to solve this problem. And I'll tell you more about that. I don't know if you saw this article in the New York Times on Monday, but the wind industry in the United States is in trouble, and it's in trouble around the world as well. And it's in trouble for reasons that I'll explain here in the next slide. But that issue is limiting how much wind energy is developed around the world, and we have a solution to that. The problem is that the best wind sites are built first. The windiest sites, the easiest to access, the closest to the transmission grid, those get built out first. Now they're having to find more remote windy areas. They're having to deal with grid transmission, congestion problems, and the need for more transmission lines. There are, offshore turbine projects are very expensive. There's opposition to offshore. There's opposition to onshore projects because these turbines are tall. The traditional turbines, they can be seen from miles around. There's concerns that these traditional turbines harm wildlife. There's opposition for that issue. And then there's, this issue, well, we can put turbines up on the roofs of buildings and houses. Well, there's a small market for that, but most people do not live where it's windy enough to make wind energy work. So those are the problems that the industry is facing. And we have a solution to that. Basically, these tall turbines cannot handle turbulent wind. That leaves the area near the ground without a technology to use it. That turbulent wind, it gusts, it pulses, it changes direction. It really creates a problem for the traditional propeller type turbine. If you think about it, that blade on a propeller type turbine connects to that center drivetrain at a single point. And if that blade goes through turbulence, it shakes. And when it shakes, that drivetrain shakes. And that wears out the bearings. And if you have to go fix that, those things are 300 feet above the ground, sometimes 400 feet above the ground. A massively expensive crane needs to be brought in to replace that drivetrain. So the horizontal axis turbine companies, they make sure that their turbines are placed far enough apart from each other and high above the ground to avoid turbulence. Well, that leaves a lot of land wasted, a lot of land that is excellent wind, but without a technology that can use it. Now, we've been working on this for a long time, as you heard a little bit about in my history. And the process of creating a technology, I can tell you a little bit about that with these pictures here. So these turbines over here on the left, this one right here, that is got guy wires on it. It's held up by the center mast at the top. It allows it to not have much vibration in it. The harmonic resonance is limited. And this was our breakthrough in terms of being able to have a turbine that has just 3 blades. And that was why we got through technology readiness level 5. It was quite a good proof that a 3-bladed turbine would work. Then we have this turbine, the first cantilever turbine. That was a huge technological problem, and it happened after our original inventor passed on because he could not believe that this turbine could even be made. But with the new engineers, young engineers, they made it, and we ended up having it installed at the National Testing Center in Denmark, and it had its problems, like any new breakthrough prototype did. But what we did is we got the data necessary to validate the very first aeroelastic models that have ever been done on these kinds of turbines. I'll tell you more about Dr. David Malcolm and the models later, but that was the technological breakthrough. Having a model that you could predict harmonic resonance and loads and all the rest. And that led us to redesign this turbine and install this turbine down at the UL testing facility in Texas. That's model 3.1. It matched the modeling almost perfectly. It has its problems, and when we built it, we realized it's not easy to build, it's not easy to assemble, it's not easy to install, and the engineers went back and redid it. And they came and brought us to model 3.4.0 over here on the right. And this is the model. It's got 6 arms instead of 9 arms. It's got 3 blades instead of what over here is actually 6 blades. It's a simple, much simpler model, and it led us to the breakthrough of being able to have patents. So in the term figuring out how to make this new turbine, the engineering team came up with some great patents. And I'll give you this a couple examples on this. On the left here is the standard pipe mast that almost everybody in the vertical axis industry uses. It's pipes. It requires a full penetration weld with these flanges. It's not easy to make. It's very expensive. So a single one of these and Model 3.1 cost $24,000 to make. And the engineers came up with this concept of a hexagonal mast. And you take a sheet of metal, you drill holes in it, then you bend it, and it can be super straight, and you can have flat sides to bolt things on, and you don't have to have welds. And if you're going to operate something, and this turbine rotates 15 million times a year, if you're going to operate something that's going to rotate that much, you don't want welds. So this is a new patent that we got, a hexagonal mast that connects to a hexagonal drivetrain. Over here is a picture of the drawing of our Model 4.0 turbine. All the things in yellow I can tell you about. They're all the different new patents that we have. We have 9 new patents. One of them has been granted. The one that's been granted is a hinge that goes between this arm and this blade. And here's a picture of that. If you think about a turbine that operates 15 million revolutions a year for 20 plus years, that thing, it's going to wiggle and move at that joint. And almost anything wears out except a very strong pin in a hinge. And this hinge mechanism, the US Patent Office just granted us this mechanism. And this is why we think that the largest source of revenue in the future of this company is going to be in licensing our patents to the other big players that are going to enter this market. Once we prove that, yes, you really can make a turbine that can handle turbulence. Look, we certified it. We've got the modeling for it. The modeling has been certified. Once we do that, as Vestas told us a couple years ago, they want to buy our company because they know that the mid-level wind resource is strong near the ground. They know it's all over the world, but they have no engineers, no modeling, no experience in vertical axis wind turbines. And the method most of these companies, like these folks here in the wind industry, they buy companies that bring in innovations. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. What exit strategy, liquidity event do we want to pursue? But we think that these players are going to need our patents to get into the mid-level wind market. And they're going to get into the mid-level wind market because it is a big market. So we used UL's Wind Navigator. It is probably the most accurate wind speed predictive tool in the world. And we evaluated about 10,000 wind farms out of the 33,000 in the list, that all 10,000 we could find. It's a really good program for interns to work on. And we evaluated their wind speeds at 15 and 20 meters above the ground, 50 to 66 feet above the ground. And we came up with about 18% of the world's wind farms have excellent wind speeds below the tall turbines in these wind farms. And we know that we're pretty sure that this trend is going to continue, that 15, 18, 20% of the wind farms in the future will also have excellent wind speeds. And that brings us to why we think there's a $700 billion market in the wind farm alone over the next 10 years. We think that a lot of those wind farms are going to be used to produce hydrogen gas, so that you can actually build out those understories of those wind farms without needing transmission lines. There's going to be Vought-only wind farms. Those are wind farms that have excellent wind, but because of bird issues or view issues or too close to airport issues, they can't build out the resource. They need something short to be able to do that. And then there's this distributed market, which I'll get to in just a second. This is a graphic of a understory development at the Shiloh 2 wind farm in southern Solano County. NextEra, which is the largest wind farm owner in the country, owns this wind farm. I've talked to the vice president there a number of times, and they are rooting for us to get through technology readiness level 8 so that they can bring our tech turbines into this wind farm. And I can go into how that works and what the process is and why the studies say, hey, if you add vertical axis turbines underneath these tall turbines, you're going to get an increased output of the tall turbines. So if you want to hear more about that, ask me that in the chat. I'd be happy to tell you about that. It's one of my favorite subjects. But then the other big market is this distributed wind market. And that is going to be the first market, because building large projects and wind farms require bird studies, large EIRs, environmental impact reports. They require pilot projects. There's just a lot of steps to connect into the grid in these places. So that's why I'll show you later in the financial projections, we don't expect to have the wind farm market start until 2027 or so. But we're ready for the distributed wind market, and we've been developing advancing projects in not just in the United States, but in Barbados, up in Scotland, and other places. And these projects are the ones that we'll develop first. And the easiest one to develop are the ones in which the energy does not go into the grid. And so these distributed grid is the three-phase lines, 3 lines on a transmission poles that run down your backyards or run along the highways. They're not the super large transmission lines that go from a coal-fired power plant or a wind farm into a major city. So that is called the distributed grid. And smaller projects, 5 megawatt, $20 million projects, can go right into the 3-phase grid wherever it's windy enough. So that'll be our first big market. And we've identified almost 200 sites with excellent wind that use a lot of energy. And that is our first market. And this is an example of this market. This is the Walmart distribution center in Cheyenne, Wyoming. There's a Lowe's distribution center. There's a Microsoft data center. There is numerous places within Cheyenne, Wyoming that use a lot of energy. And the wind speed in Cheyenne is enormous near the ground. So this example of this Walmart, why I like to use it, is Walmart attempted to put on a 1 megawatt tall turbine on their property. And they applied for it. They went through all the process, but it never got built. And it didn't get built because of issues about Warren Air Force Base nearby, about view impacts, about setback easements. These things are very tall. You have to have them at least one time the height of the blade tip away from any property line or road. So it's hard to fit these tall turbines on these kinds of properties. But this distribution center, we could put 8 megawatts. We did the analysis. There's a row right here. There's 3 rows down here. There is rows on the back side. They're all excellent wind speeds here. This kind of fitting in between that parking lot and the property line, that's plenty of room there for this is a multi-megawatt row. This section right in here, that's about 2.5 megawatts right in that section. And we can put 8 on this property. And that would produce enough energy to supply the entire facility and handle the future demand that's going to come from these kinds of facilities as the vehicles turn electric in the future. And you can imagine at a distribution center, these trucks are going to want to recharge while they're loading. And if they can get energy produced on site, that's a huge plus. So on a project like this, we would end up, our gross margin on this project, a full build out would be about $10 million. So it's also one of the most lucrative areas for us to work in, partially because of the tax credits that come to make it worthwhile. For the next 8 years now, those tax credits should continue. So we do have no competition yet. But I'll go through these things. We know we've talked both Sea-Twirl and Worldwide Wind. We've had conversations about them, about technology. They're building vertical axis turbines for the offshore environment, very large turbines. Ours are like 70 kilowatts. They're 2,000 kilowatt machines, 30 times bigger than ours. So those turbines are not designed for turbulent wind. The ocean is laminar smooth flow. So they don't like the idea of having to deal with turbulent wind. This X1 X-Flow is up in Seattle. It came out of Caltech. Fair wind is out of Belgium. They have vertical axis turbines, but they're putting their turbines on tall towers to avoid the turbulent wind. Heirloom, and they're got 25 kilowatts, and I think they're at technology. They're not yet at technology readiness level 6. They haven't made full-scale prototypes yet. So the next one is Heirloom. Bill Gates put $4 million into that. People got all excited about that, asked me about it, and all of our engineers and everybody I talked to said, well, that sail type device going around on a cable is not going to be able to handle turbulent wind. And that is what happens near the ground. It's super turbulent in areas where there's enough wind to really make a difference. And then there's these small turbines like flower wind. You may have seen flower turbines you may have seen on Start Engine. That has got a $155 million valuation. They raised $15 million from their investors on Start Engine, but it's a tiny market. Their turbines are Savonius type turbines are very inefficient. I am glad we are not in that market where there's a lot of competition. We have a lot of traction. As I said, down in Texas, we've completed technology readiness level 7 with our model 3.1. That is, to give you an example of how gusty it is down there, the engineers recorded a 10-mile-an-hour change in wind in 1 second. So, wow, a gust like that comes through, slams into your turbine, and your turbine has to be able to handle that kind of a gust in the near ground wind. Well, we can. The Model 3.1 did excellent there. So we, as I said about the aeroelastic model, Dr. David Malcolm brought that in when we had problems with that 3.0 turbine in Texas. I knew him, and when he's retired after a 45-year career, we hired him. And he brought with him a model that came out of Sandia National Labs, and he was happy to be able to test and validate the model. I'll tell you a little bit more about him in the team slide, because we're very proud of our team of engineers. And all this led to these 9 patents and about $100 million in our sales and project pipeline through 2026. By the way, this is a picture here, and the picture behind me, this is a ridge line in Tehachapi, California, one of the windiest spots in the state. They fully built out the capacity to put the tall turbines in, but they can add another 5,000 megawatts in and around the tall turbines with these short vertical axis turbines. So this little ridge line doubles the energy output, and we can put 2 rows of our turbines on that ridge line, whereas they only get 1 row. And so that's an example of an ideal location for where our turbines would go. Now, sales of turbines. We start off with 2 turbines sold this year, 20 turbines sold next year, somewhere around 80 or so turbines, 100 in 2026, and then it starts to ramp up. And it really ramps up here in 28 and 29 and 30, because those are wind farm sales. And wind farm sales are going to be, probably a minimum of 100 turbines to even 1,000 turbines or more in a single sale. A 100 megawatt project is pretty normal for a wind farm. That's 1,400 turbines. So when you think about the size of the market, 200,000 megawatts, and here in 2020-30, that's still only 800 megawatts, a tiny percentage of the total market. And this slide shows that we would hit somewhere around $1.6 billion in sales to get only that tiny sliver of the market. The gold part of these slides is wind farm sales, and you can see that they start to pick up as we go through. And I'd be happy to answer questions about why it takes longer for wind farms to develop projects than distributed grid projects. So back to our team slide. Here's Dr. Malcolm. He's fantastic. He really knows his stuff. We brought in Dr. Ala Ajala. She came on. She told me the other day, I came onto your company because you had Dr. Malcolm there, and I really wanted to work with the top person in the world on this. And so he's been mentoring her, and she's now also our expert, and she runs the engineering team. And we're really happy to have her on the as the lead of our engineering team with David as our senior engineer. We have as our consulting engineers, they're not on this picture, but they were with us at that model up in Finland. They were with us in Denmark. Our team of about 7 consulting engineers love this company and our product and have been working with us for over 10 years, many of them. So we got a great engineering team. We have the team needed to get through certification. We have the team needed to get us to our Series B round that raises the money to get through technology readiness level 9. That is the last step in the commercialization process for a wind turbine. And that is that banks will finance customers multi-million-dollar loans for 10-year loans. Well, why would a bank lend money for 10 years on a new technology? Well, because what if the technology doesn't last the full 10 years? Then they're stuck without being able to get their loan paid back. But we talked to a lot of bank due diligence officers, and they want to see 10 to 20 plus turbines operating for at least a year. So that's technology readiness level 9. And that is where we raise a Series B round to finance those projects, because we're going to have to help finance them. And then we bring on the CFO, the other officers, the VP of sales when we have that larger round. Until then, we are on a tight budget with the team that we have, and we do not use a lot of extra money to hire people until we've completed technology readiness level 8 and have that big chunk of money. We are seeking $3 million to get us through technology readiness level 8. We've already raised $780,000 in 1 month through a Regulation CF crowdfunding offering. We had to shut it down on April 29th because we had not completed our 2023 audit. With that money, we're able to start ordering the longest lead time parts for the 2 turbines that will go through certification in Texas. So we're on schedule now for a begin certification in the fall of 2024. This 506C offering is for accredited investors. We have set so that the discounted share price ends on July 5th. We set that date in part because we get the money in by July 5th, we're on schedule for meeting the installation in the fall. So you can ask me about that. I'd be glad to tell you more about that as well. So the thing that people want to know is, how risky is this project? And the answer is pretty low, because we've gone through all these steps. We have the model that says, yes, this turbine will work. It's like a 747 airplane. Before you fly it for the first time, no one's ever flown it before, but they know it's going to fly because their computer models are accurate. Well, our computer models are accurate, and we know that our model 4.0 will operate as we say it will. It will achieve certification. We have everything lined up at Texas. There is really nothing to stop it from moving forward except the money. And then once we have achieved modeling certification, then companies like Vestas and GE are going to want to buy us. So that's why the risk in this kind of investment is low. And it's an unusual opportunity because very few companies ever reach the end of the utility scale renewable energy technology commercialization process without being bought up by another company, or without having a lot of money in from venture capitalists. We have no money from venture capitalists. We have only one private family fund that's put in $250,000, but it's mostly been families and friends, small investors through crowdfunding, and our Series A investor family out of the Bay Area. And I can tell you more about that as if you want as well. So that is kind of my short little pitch on what we're doing, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kevin. We definitely do have some questions in the chat, so let me start with the first one, which is, are you looking to build an investor fund, or are you interested in one investor that is partner with equity?
We gave up on trying to find one investor. I spent a year talking to 100 VCs and family offices, and they love the technology, they love the market, but they will not be, they want a lead investor in a round. But I couldn't find anybody that would take on the lead investor role, do the due diligence, sit on the board, give those other investors the comfort that they need to come in on a $10 million round. So after that, and talking to a lot of experts in the field, they all basically say you just need to get through technology readiness level 8. So with that, we go back to the retail investors. And this time we're doing direct equity through common shares. Common shares are sold, you have less value than preferred shares. So there is an opportunity for a discounted price with the common shares. When there is a liquidity event, preferred shares turn to common, and so buying common shares and getting more shares than preferred shares, in my opinion, is the way to go on this. I'm not sure if I completely answered that question, but
Yeah. I think that's good. And if there's a follow-up to that, please feel free to ask that in the chat as well. And this one, some of these questions, if they do cover anything that you did cover, I might still ask them just in case anyone joined late. But someone was clarifying, is it Vestas that wanted to acquire your company?
yes, Vesta is the largest wind turbine manufacturer, probably out of China. I think Goldwind finally surpassed them. We had a meeting with their chief technology officer a few years ago. It was a fun meeting. They really knew about vertical axis turbines. They just did not have the capacity and the engineering capacity. They're in heavy competition with the Chinese to develop ever larger offshore turbines, floating turbines. It's a difficult market in competing out there with the biggest
Sorry, did
companies
you
in the
say
world.
Vestas was a Chinese company or they're a
No,
competition to
Vestas
it?
is a Danish company,
Oh,
but
Danish. Okay.
Goldwind has become the largest turbine company in the world. But Vestas is the one that says they're interested in buying us once we get through technology readiness level 8.
Did you say Danish or Vegas?
Danish. It's a Danish company.
Danish. Okay,
Yes,
Danish.
Denmark.
Okay.
They
Got it. Okay.
Denmark was one of the leading wind turbine developers in the world, and they still hold a lead there.
Okay. Wonderful. The next question is, what about the bird kills? Wouldn't lower to the ground mean more birds?
Oh, excellent question. So actually, lower to the ground, the ornithologists say provides a lot of benefits. So wind blows at night, which is a significant benefit in the renewable world where solar ends when the sun sets, even when before the sun sets, right? As it gets low on the horizon, the energy plummets out of solar. So in states like California, we have a time of use charge because there is so much solar in the afternoon and there's less renewable energy in the after the sun sets, but wind keeps going and going. But that creates a problem for birds, migrating birds, because those turbines, the tops of their blades can be 500 feet above the ground. Well, that can be within the migrating path of geese that fly at night and other birds that are migrating at night. And then they can't see those blades. The other advantage of being close to the ground is, for example, there are hawks and eagles. They'll be flying at 1,000 meters, 3,000 feet above the ground, and they're tracking a rabbit. And their eyesight, their binocular vision, is down to the last 10 to 15 meters, 50 feet or so. And they see nothing above that. And now they swoop down to kill that rabbit, and they go into a turbine, wind turbine, and they do not see this two-dimensional object where the blades are spinning at, their tip speeds are 150 to 200 miles an hour. So those are the reasons why the horizontal axis turbines create problems for birds. The ornithologists, the bird experts say, well, vertical axis turbines are three-dimensional. Birds evolved to see three-dimensional objects. You probably notice that birds often avoid cars, surprisingly, right? Because they can see an object coming at them. Well, a three-dimensional blade comes at them, and so they should see and avoid it. Well, that we're not absolutely sure of that. Birds have different bird sites and all kinds of technical stuff. I'll be happy to tell you about if you want. We're doing a seminar on this, on just birds and bats, and I'll go into a lot more detail there. But what we're going to add is bird detection, motion detection technology out of Spain or out of Greece. They have two different technologies. They see birds 300 meters away, almost 1,000 feet away. And the technology can tell you what species it is by the flight pattern. And if it's known that that species does not see and avoid our turbines, there's plenty of time for our turbines to then slow down or even stop until the birds pass. And then the turbines start up again. So we're going to include this technology on all of our projects until we get the data that shows, yep, these birds really do. They see it and they avoid our turbines. Or, oh, not that species. We're going to have to make sure we don't place turbines in that species habitat, or make sure that this motion detection camera technology is on those turbines so that we don't harm those species. So that's our plan with birds. And there is, I'll tell you more about this on the seminar, but there are studies in the Altamont Hills that showed the VOTs there harmed birds at half the rate of the horizontal turbines. And those are two-bladed vertical axis turbines, not three-bladed. So they were not as easily seen as our three-bladed ones will be. Probably went into too much detail on that.
No, it's okay.
I do
And
have
just
I do have my degree in evolution and ecology. That's what I got out of UC Davis. And so I really do love talking about animals and evolution and ecology. So sorry about that.
no, no worries. And just before we leave the bird topic, we did have one more question saying, is the bird thing worthy of deployment? Is it worth all this effort?
Uh, that fact that we're not going to harm birds? Oh yeah, certainly. And the idea that we can go into areas that are already developed, have turbines on them, and by adding an understory and getting 2-3 times more energy output from that wind farm, we won't need to have as many other new wind farms built on raw land. We won't need to have as many solar farms covering new habitat. It's an overall plus for birds and bats and species and habitat to build out the understories of existing wind farms.
Okay, I think Jordan, if you want to unmute and ask yourself too before we move on from the bird thing, but I think he says, let me ask again, does the bird thing slow you down? Is it a good enough factor? Is that what you're wondering, Jordan?
I'm here. Kevin, it's good to see you again. I just can't believe you're spending so much energy on the birds when you have so many more problems to solve. So why is it such an important thing other than the humane factor?
Because you can't get into wind farms like in large scale installations where there are endangered species. So for example, Solano County
It's a regulatory thing.
Has the Swainson hawk.
Kevin, it's a regulatory thing?
Yes, you
All
can.
right, that's all I needed to hear. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes. So if you want to do large projects in wind farms, which we want to do in areas where there's condors or eagles, which is all of California, except for down in the desert, you need to be able to prove to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that you can operate the turbines without harming those endangered species, or you do not get to put in billions of dollars of projects into wind farms. So yeah, that's our big market, and we pretty confident that that our turbines will not harm birds. So we are going to jump right in and get the data to prove it, because that increases the valuation of the company tremendously.
Yes, and I think that answers most everyone's questions on birds. Is the main reason you're doing it is, of course, for the birds, but also it's a regulatory thing. You have to do it. So,
yes.
Okay, let's move on from that. The question is, why do vertical turbines improve performance of traditional wind turbines?
Oh, well, now you're going to let me go to another slide. Ah, here it is. This is the wind synergy slide. This data came out of Caltech. Dr. John DeBerry had been studying fish in schools of fish and realized that their tails created these coupled vortices. He looks up coupled vortex and he finds out that our old company, Wind Harvest Company, had a patent on it. I talked to him. He goes and meets our founder. He goes out and sees our 3-turbine array in Palm Springs, and he decides that our turbines are too big for him to do the tests. So he gets this little 2 kilowatt Windspire turbines. He puts 20 of them up in a field. He moves them around, does all this data collection, and says, wow, these shed vortices that come off the back of your turbines, they suck fast-moving wind from above the ground down to the ground, because in the center of the vortices, it's a low pressure zone. So as you go higher above the ground, the wind speed increases. And so if you can draw that faster moving wind down to the ground, these tall turbines here will see a greater output. So DeBerry's work led to work out of Cambridge University and Stanford University and Concordia University in Montreal. All came back to the same thing. Vertical axis turbines in wind farms should see the tall turbines realize about a 10% increase in their energy output when vertical axis turbines are properly installed underneath them. Now, this is going to be one of the areas that we think we're going to have another stream of income from, because we're going to invest in a LiDAR unit that gets the data. We then put that into computational fluid dynamic modeling, CFD modeling, and because we're the first and no one's ever been able to do this on the scale of a utility, we'll have the data necessary to create the modeling that allows for wind farm owners to say, oh, where would I place these vertical axis turbines in the wind farm to not only extract the most wind from the verticals, but how to get the most energy out of the tall turbines. Well, we think that'll be a nice income stream for us in the future, placement services with the data that we will and the modeling that we'll create as we go along. So happy to show that slide.
Okay, wonderful. The next is a clarifying question that you said you have 1 issued patent and several pending patent applications. Is this correct?
Yeah. Correct. So the U.S. Patent Office has an accelerated timeline for renewable energy patent applications. And we received the hinge patent about a month or so ago. We've gotten all the reviews on the 6 other initial patents we applied for, and they're all positive. It just takes a little while to get them through. So we're expecting all those 7 patents to be granted. Just about last week, we filed 2 new patents. These patents, the new patents that we'll show about in our seminar on our patents and innovations, allow the turbine to be assembled in an assembly facility like an umbrella, put on the back of a flatbed truck, bundled up, delivered out to the installation site, picked up by a crane, and put on the top of the tower. And you can put these turbines up so that you do almost all the work in an enclosed facility, and it allows for a rapid installation in the field. And if you know about field work, you want to limit the amount of time you're putting it on. And a 100 megawatt project is 1,400 of our turbines. So you need to make it easy and quick to install these turbines. So these patents that we have on the called the bundling patents and this involve hinges are very exciting that we're going to get these patents as well. So those are our 9 patents, and I'll go through them in our seminar.
Okay, wonderful. And we are going to continue with the Q&A. I am going to just put up a poll to get the interest of the investors on the call in Wind Harvest. So you can just take a few minutes and answer that as we continue with Q&A. The next question is, what's the pipeline look like? Pre-purchase order agreements, LOIs, etc.
Yeah, one of the problems we had is it was difficult to raise money, and we had to slow down our project development. So we have ranchers and property owners that want our products. We've talked to the utilities. They say, yes, we can get a power purchase agreement with them, but the next step involved a lot more money. And so we've had to kind of put that on hold until we've raised more capital. But we put in 7 years of effort down in, for example, in Barbados. Barbados, there's a whole workshop seminar on just Barbados because it's such an interesting market, and it's an example of island nations where it's very difficult to get the tall turbines on the islands for all kinds of reasons, road problems and view problems and port problems and crane problems. But our turbines can be driven around the island on a flatbed truck. About 40% of the labor on the turbine can be done right in Barbados. Barbados has a very good trade wind. They want to put in renewable energy. They can't put solar in because their island is so small that people are opposing it. So they're really rooting for us. And the National Sports Council there has once put 50 megawatts of our turbines. Because it's trade winds, there'll be 50 kilowatts. So that's 1,000 turbines that would go into a 50 megawatt project on the National Sports Council's land in the north part of the island. So that's an example of a development that we expect to roll out here with a small project and a larger project, and then the 50 megawatt project probably around 2026, 27. So we have that down in Anza Electric Co-op is we've had an MOU with them to put a 1 megawatt project on. We have the landowners up there all interested. We have not gone through the process of actually acquiring site control because that's another expensive little process. But we have all the landowners there would like to have our turbines on their land. I should say all but one. But we so that's an example. Marin Clean Energy here control as the community choice aggregator for Solano County. We've talked to them about multiple different projects in Solano County. They're interested in our energy. They would like to do a power purchase agreement with us. So that the problem there is that PG&E requires a $70,000 payment to evaluate the adding of a turbine project to the transmission line. Well, we don't have that $70,000 yet, so we can't advance that project. So Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota, we're working with them to put a 2 turbine project on their land. They want to test out how our turbines can be compatible with their radar and with their flight patterns. There's numerous little projects like that that are in various parts of the development process.
Okay, wonderful. We have a couple of people asking if you could please go back to the slide again too, and remind us how much you're raising, how much you have raised, and allocation of funding.
Sure. So $3 million raised is what we're seeking right now. We've raised a little over $20 million since the beginning of the company. If I take out the $6 million that was in the original company, and in some ways that's reasonable to not show that as part of the valuation, then we've invested about $15 million in cash into the company, plus about another $2.5 million in promissory notes through crowdfunding raises. So that's the amount of capital that's been actually raised to get us through to this end of the commercialization process. The money from the raise is going to predominantly go to this third-party certification, the installation of 2 turbines right near the Model 3.1, 2 turbines because they're placed a meter apart, 3 feet apart from each other. And we're not selling single turbines. We're selling arrays of turbines, megawatts of turbines. And when these turbines are placed very close together, the neighboring turbine's energy output increases by at least 15%. So you have to show power performance and acoustics. And so we're going to do it on a pair of turbines because that's what we'll be selling. Minimums of pairs of turbines in arrays. Money to help advance these pilot projects in the pipeline. Money to do these additional permits and to finish the patenting process. We have some debt that we're going to pay off. That all leads us to being in a better position for a Series B round to get us through technology readiness level 8. So that is what the money predominantly goes to. We should be finished certification in the winter of 2025, and we'll start looking at a Series B round as soon as the turbines are up and installed, and the investors in the B round can come visit them, see them, listen to them. And so that'll be around the end of 2025. We'll be looking for a Series B round of about $10 million.
Okay, great. And what are the terms for the $3 million?
That terms are common shares at 6 cents a piece. It has a valuation, a post-money valuation at about $17 million. If you took that and converted it to a fully diluted valuation at the preferred share price that we last did at 9 cents, it's about the company's post-money valuation would be around $33 million. So it's a great opportunity to get into a company that has done all the work and is still as a very low valuation. As I showed that flower turbine, you can look on the Start Engine site and see that they have a valuation of $155 million. So having a company with our first to market, with such a large market, with the technology that's been able to actually do this, it's quite a good opportunity to get in with a lot of shares as common shares. So I'm happy to answer more, but I think that covers it.
I think so. Could we know the maximum capacity that could be produced, 100 megawatts or more? What is required land area onshore for such capacity?
Okay, that's interesting. So we just did a presentation for the Kumeyaay Nation down in San Diego. Their casino has a turbine on it, a tall turbine. They also own the land on which there's a 50 megawatt wind farm. They are super interested in being able to make use of all the wind the creator gave them. And so they would like to build out this understory of their land. And they very much like the idea that our turbines will last 70 plus years because they think in longer term timelines than most people do. So on that, we gave them an analysis of their existing turbines on the land, and we get about 4x more energy output per acre than the horizontal axis turbines. That analysis is also for almost all the wind farms. If you look at our reports on that, and I'd be happy to send you that information on the reports we did on all the California wind farms, we get about 4x more energy per acre of land. And this is because our turbines are placed close together and they don't have to worry about turbulence. The tall turbines are placed far apart from each other because they have to avoid the turbulence of their neighboring turbines' blades. So that there was a second part to that question. Skylar, what was it?
Yes, what is the required land area onshore for such capacity?
So yeah, it's an interesting question. So this turbine up here, this visual right here, that land is of course grazing land. And that land has got those turbines on it. They graze cattle underneath it. We can increase this project here, increases that land's output by 3 times. And you can still graze cattle on it, as you can kind of see. So there really isn't much land actually taken out of use when you add in turbines into the understory of a wind farm. So I'm not quite sure how to address that question. That you can
That's
put these along the edges. Down in Barbados, they like the idea that these would go on the edges of their sugarcane fields, and they would act as windrows between the sugarcane fields, and they would not take any land out of their sugarcane fields. So that's an example of where they're highly compatible with existing land uses. And that Walmart one, this other one that I showed, it's because it can go in the spaces around parking lots, around the edges of buildings where nothing else is going to be used. So it's a making use of existing space.
okay, great. How do you tackle criticism in Texas regarding the recent winter frost a few years ago? How are your wind turbines different for winter? Are they winterproof?
Oh, that's a very good question. So one of the things that Ellsworth Air Force Base wants to do with us is to do more insulation around the system so that we can tolerate much lower temperatures. They had the most extreme temperature change ever recorded, something like 50 degrees in an hour. And that's one of the research parts that we're proposing to work with them on. It just involves insulation. around your power converter and your generator, and you have the right kind of lubricants in that can handle the extreme cold, or in the extreme heat. So there really isn't a problem with the kind of extreme temperatures that can be realized around the world. If you get to really extreme, you may have to do different kinds of steel to handle it. But we're not going to go into those really extreme places without at the present time, because we don't need to.
Okay, great. Um, who is manufacturing the wind turbines?
Okay. So one of the benefits we have is that there are a lot of suppliers around the world to provide the various components. So for example, we ordered the generators from Soga in Italy, one of the largest permanent magnet generator makers in the world. About 2 weeks ago, we got a message from Lancar out of Spain. They would like to bid on our generators. They can make them as well. They looks like there'll be a cheaper one. There's competition out there for the component providers. So most of the product is very easy to make. It's just cut the steel, drill holes in it, and then so that's why Barbados can make about 40% of the steel that goes into these turbines. Then you've got the blades, say they're shipped from Germany, Step G in Germany, and they're just raw extruded aluminum blades. They get sent to an assembly facility that we set up in some empty warehouse or building a few miles from the installation site. We hire local labor, we send our expert there, oversees it, and they bolt together the pieces. The arm connections to the blade end caps, they put the fairings over the blade arms, they do all the bolting together. All that stuff is done there as the different components come from wherever they are to the assembly facility. It's assembled there and then shipped on a flatbed truck a few miles away to the installation site. Places like Barbados, lots of places like the idea that there's local labor being involved in the project through a local assembly facility. These will be temporary assembly facilities because there's no need to keep a big assembly facility there unless if you're building lots and lots of turbines over many years, like we would in some of the California wind farms. So that's the advantage we have. We have multiple suppliers, and almost every country can make most of the components of our turbines. So in New Zealand, we would use New Zealand companies to make most of the components. And that provides us flexibility. We don't have to put capital into the actual fabrication facility. We don't have to worry about running it around the clock. We basically use excess capacity in other people's facilities, and they like that.
Okay, wonderful. And I know that we are about at the end of our scheduled meeting time. We do have a few more questions, so if there's anyone who needs to hop off, of course, please do so, but we will stay on here for a few more minutes to go through the rest of the questions. And I did want to let everyone know that we'll be emailing this meeting recording to you, and also Emily's going to put the link to Kevin's Calendly in the chat, and we will email that to you if you'd like to schedule a follow-up meeting. But you'll be seeing a recap email from us coming out shortly later today. But we will continue with the questions while we have a few more. Is there a geographic requirement for the wind turbines?
Yes, a very good question. So, in places like the Great Plains, in Texas, for example, there is what's called a wind shear. If you've traveled into an airport there in the summer, your plane often drops a little bit as it comes into landing. And that's because the wind near the ground drops off rapidly in these places. And that wind shear makes it so that, gosh, if the wind is so much lower near the ground, let's just put a tall turbine up where the wind is significantly higher above the ground. But in places like California and Hawaii and Washington and Oregon and places like Wyoming, all these other places, there are geographical features, topography changes that cause the wind to speed up near the ground. So for example, if you've been in LA and driven from LA to Palm Springs, you've driven right through what's called the San Gorgonio Pass. San Jacinto, Mount San Jacinto is on one side. It's around 10,000 feet high. On the other side, a mile or two away, is San Gorgonio. It's another 10,000 feet high. And the wind from Dana Point in southern Orange County up to Malibu all focuses and funnels through this gap. And when a fluid enters a narrower space, Bernoulli says it speeds up, and it does. And then it has an inversion layer because there's smog down there in LA, and that keeps the wind from moving up. And then it goes over a hill, and then it speeds up again. So on the flats of the San Gorgonio Pass, it's 16 miles per hour. You go to the hills, it's close to 20 miles an hour. A fantastic resource, all driven by the topography and the drive of cool wind from the ocean moving into the hot desert on the other side. And that hot desert, that wind is a low pressure zone. It sucks in the denser wind from the ocean, and it moves through these Tehachapi Pass, Altamont Pass, the Carquinez Straits. These are the places where it gets very, very windy near the ground. So yes, it's a geographical feature that provides these 18% of wind farms around the world with very excellent mid-level winds, wind speeds below 100 feet.
Okay, wonderful. And I believe this is the last question. And if I missed any, feel free to put them in the chat, anyone. But when you say you are ready, can you elaborate entry to market in 2024 and 2025? What is the situation right now?
So the certification company, RE Innovations, has gone through the turbines. They've done all the preliminary certification work. They're ready to complete certification. We paid them a bunch of money already to do all that preliminary work. The long lead time components, the blades from Soga in Germany and the generator out of Italy are been ordered. So that is on its way. The site is completely ready. The substation is there, the transformer's there, the conduit's all there. It's all there for 3.1, and we designed it to add more turbines in the future. So everything's set on the installation facility. We're allowed to actually sell the turbines on the installation facility. So our first sale will be the sale of our Model 3.1 and our Model 4.0. They will qualify for 30% tax credits. So we're setting up a limited liability company in which another investor will come in who wants to make use of those tax credits and accelerated depreciation. We can't make use of those because we have a lot of loss carry forward and R&D tax credits. So there's no need for us to harvest those tax credits, but other people want those. So our first sale will be $1.2 million on the 3 turbines in Texas. So that's all set to go. And then we are thinking that based on the other project we have in the pipeline, we should have installation of projects at the end of 2025, another 20 turbines.
Okay, great. And I think that we hit the end of our questions there. If anyone has any further questions, please feel free to stay on for a few minutes and just unmute yourself and ask. But we've had a super awesome meeting today with Kevin. And like I said, we will be sending out a recap, which will include the meeting recording from today, the Calendly link to sign up for a meeting with Kevin, and he'll be CC'd on the email so you can reach out to him directly. But thank you everyone for joining, and we will hopefully see you at another one of our events soon. So thanks so much, Kevin.
Thank you, Skylar, and everybody. I look forward to talking to you individually.